Welcome or welcome back. Tonight we're doing true horror stories from real places in Northern Ireland. If you enjoy Irish horror like this, like the video, subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from in the comments. Let's get on it. I was filming late at Enniskillen Castle, a heritage piece, just a small crew, and we were wrapping up just after sunset. The site manager was locking up, but he said I could go and grab the last set of shots on the battlements if I stayed within sight of the Sawyer. It was one of those sharp evenings where the river carries every sound. I set the tripod up at the corner and started a slow pan to grab the last bits of B-roll footage. Halfway through, I heard boots on the stone behind me. Not trainers, heavy, hard soles with a steady pace. I turned around with the camera still rolling. No one on the wall walk, just the river moving and the flag line ticking against the pole. I kept recording, this time pointing the mic down the path. The footsteps started again, on the left side now. The exact rhythm of what you imagine was someone walking a patrol. 12 steps, pause, then 12 more. The audio meter jumped with each step, though the picture captured nothing. I lifted the tripod and went to the stair tower. I'm not proud of how fast I moved. It wasn't quite a sprint, but it was almost there. At the top of the spiral steps, the footsteps stopped right behind me. I didn't turn. Then a short exhale, the kind you make when you set all weight that's been on your shoulders. I went down, quick, steady, hand on the centre post the whole way. The stairs felt warmer than the air, which didn't make any sense. And actually, it still doesn't. In the car later, I checked on the audio. You can plot the steps as if they're tracing a circuit. 12 counts, a turn, 12 counts, a turn. 3 full laps around the wall walk, and back to the stairs. On the final pass, there's the metal clink I heard. Then a breath right beside the mic, and then the waveform flattens. The next morning, my camera bag had a thin grey line across the top zip, like something had brushed past it. I hadn't set it down on the walls. It had been on my shoulder the whole time. The dust wiped off in one stroke. The audio didn't wipe off. I still have it, but I try my best not to listen to it. We parked at the lay-by, outside Kandu house, just after 9. The place sits over the town, like it's turning away from it. Ivy over slate, boarded windows, wind working its way through the gaps. We went in a side door, where the timber's been pulled back. Inside, the dust is thick on everything, except for the paths that people make. Wallpaper moves if you breathe on it. The floorboards give a little. So we walked the edges, hand on the wall, and torches head low. Second floor, last room on the right. A wheelchair facing the window. Not a prop chair. Old metal hubs and a cracked vinyl seat. Dust piled up on the backrest. The pushrooms had 2 clean finger lines on one side, like someone had turned it not long ago. We didn't touch it. We were deciding if we should go when a dry cough came from the next room. Not a jump scare noise, a real cough. Another cough then further along, as if he ever had made it move through the wall. I called out, asked if someone was there, but I got no answer. We stepped out into the corridor, and the cough answered from behind us. back into the wheelchair room. We hadn't heard footsteps. Nothing creaked, just a sound moving around, like the rooms were connected in some other way. I looked back in. The front caster on the chair, now no longer straight. It had been angled toward the door now, by a few degrees. A small change, but it hadn't been like that. On the stairs down, the air turned frigid cold. Not a draft. A standing cold that sits on your clothes and doesn't leave. At the basement turn off, the cold rose past us like someone climbing, and the smell changed to old rubber and disinfectant. Outside at the car, one of my friends laughed and told me to hold still. Two parallel dusty streaks ran across the back of my jacket at shoulder height, hand width apart, like I'd been pushed. I hadn't leant on anything, and they didn't wipe off with a sleeve. They didn't wash out later either. The wheelchair room window looks out over the sea. When I checked the photo I'd taken of the chair, a single shot with the flash off, there's a faint reflection in the glass that doesn't match us or the frame. It's a shape you'd make if you were standing with both hands on the push rims, waiting. I picked up evening maintenance at Armagh jail when they were surveying parts of it. It was things like tagging the door, oiling the hinge, noting a few cracks, that kind of thing. They told me that the woman's wing was lively after dark. I laughed. That was until I had to work late. The corridor light in there hums more than it shines. About halfway down, a cell door to my right clicked. It was an old steel latch sound that's different from anything modern, and eased open about maybe 2 inches. Then stopped. I called out, "Hello?" That's what you do after all. 3 slow taps came from inside on the bars. Not metal on metal, more like knuckle on paint. 3 taps. I pushed the door closed with 2 fingers. It bounced against the frame and opened the same 2 inches again. I didn't think it was funny anymore. I reached for my radio, and that's when breath hit the backside of my neck. Not a draft, it was an obvious breath, damp and close, with the faint, stale, sweet smell you get in rooms that haven't been open in too long. I walked, not fast, just put my feet down, refusing to look at the doorway again, halfway to the end of the corridor. My jacket sleeve tugged, hard enough to move my arm, quick and sharp, like a small hand trying to get attention. When I eventually got back to the locker room, I rolled up a sleeve. 4 fingertip bruises had already started to rise along my forearm. Small spacing, too small almost. I left a note on the clipboard saying that I'd finished the other wing and wouldn't be back that night. I didn't put my name on it. They knew who wrote it anyway. The bruises went yellow by the weekend. That part's normal. The part that wasn't, the jacket I was wearing, still smells like that cell, no matter what I wash it with. I was location scouting at Shane's castle. The couple wanted something historic but not touristy, so I was checking the archways and ruined walls to see what angles would work in the late winter light. The groundskeeper was with me, an older man. Didn't really talk unless he had to. We'd been walking the grounds nearly 40 minutes now. When we came around the corner towards the courtyard arch, and that's when I saw him. A man standing directly under the archway, facing the stone. Not beside it, forehead pressed flat to the wall, arms hanging loose and feet together, completely still. I thought maybe he worked there. Maybe he was reading something that was carved into the stone. But as we got closer, and I realised there was nothing on that section of the wall, it was just blank block. I opened my mouth to ask a groundskeeper who he was. He didn't look at me. He didn't even look at the man. He just said very quietly, "Don't speak to him." And we kept on walking. We passed him at a slight angle. I kept my eyes down, but I couldn't help it. I glanced. His coat was old, heavy wool, wet from the elbows down, like he'd been in the water. His shoes were soaked, not muddy, not wet by rain, but completely soaked, like he'd been in a lake. As we walked by, his head slid slightly along the stone, not turning or lifting, just dragging as we moved past, as if the wall had a hold of him. We didn't stop, but we also didn't hurry. We just kept continuing at the same pace we'd always had, and we didn't look back anymore. When we reached the main path, the groundskeeper finally spoke. "If you want to speak to him, you follow the sound of your voice." I asked him what he meant, but he just kept walking. I went home and tried not to think about it until I took off my jeans before bed. The bottoms were damp, only from the front, from the knees down, like I had been standing in shallow water, facing something. I told myself it was just the wet grass, condensation, anything sensible. That was until, a few nights later, I'd gotten up in the middle of the night to get a drink of water. When I walked past the window, I noticed the reflection before I noticed the glass. It was me, and behind me, a shape, standing completely still, facing the wall, not moving, not breathing, exactly the same posture. I turned around, but nothing was there. I didn't look at the window again. I just went back to bed and held my phone in my hand until morning. I haven't shot at Shane's castle since, and sometimes, for no reason I can explain, when I walk into a room with a blank wall and no furniture, I get the urge to put my forehead against it, and I have to leave the room immediately. I was DJing a small wedding at Belfast Castle. Upstairs room, decent crowd, and nothing crazy. During the setup, I kept feeling something brush my ankles. Staff said no pets are allowed, so I just ignored it and got on with the cable management. Around 11, I stepped out for a drink. The grand staircase was empty and bright. And then one landing light dipped and came back. The air went colder by a notch. Did you notice it in your lower back? On the next step, I heard a husp in my hand. It banister height. Just that thumb pressure that people make through their teeth when they're concentrating or annoyed. I put my hand on the rail so that I wouldn't stumble. For a second, the wood felt like dry fur under my palm. Then it was wood again. At the bottom, I picked up 2 bottles and came back up. 3 steps from the landing, a woman's shape stood at the top in white, turned slightly away, like she was listening down the hall. I blinked, and just like that, she wasn't there. Back in the room, I kept my head down and played. But when I went to pack the leads up, I found 5 long white hairs caught in the Velcro. Coarse, like a whisker hair. I don't own a white-haired pet, and the venue doesn't allow animals. I abandoned the strands outside and went home. In the morning, my palm had a faint set of parallel lines across it, of the exact width of the banister beads, except there are only 4 beads on that section of rail, but the mark showed 5. I was driving home from a late shift in Armagh last winter. Roads were quiet, frost already building on the grass. I took the back road toward Market Hill, the one that cuts past the old quarry. No streetlights, just houses and black fields. About 10 minutes in, I noticed headlights in my rearview mirror. Far back at first, then closer. Too close. I decided I would slow down a little, but the other car slowed too. I sped up, it sped up. No overtaking, no backing off, just holding steady on my bumper. I could only see lights, no shape or grille. Driver. It was just blinding, white light. I indicated to pull in at the little lay-by near the forestry turn-off. But car followed me and pulled in behind me. Lights stopped full beam. I just sat there, engine running, waiting for him to get out. Though no door opened. I waited for 30 seconds, then a minute. The beams were so bright, they lit up the entire inside of my car, and I could see my own shadow on the dashboard, trembling. Finally, I decided I would get out, just to see who it was. As soon as my foot hit the ground outside the car, the headlights cut out, pitch black. I stood there, now blind, only in a different way, because there was no light. I was listening to my own breathing and the quiet ticking of the cooling engines. I felt the cold from the quarry field behind me. And then I realised I didn't hear another engine, no idle or rumble. I reached into my pocket for my phone, turned on the torch, walked back a couple of steps, and I swept the beam across the lay-by. There was no other car, just tyre marks leading onto the gravel, and tyre marks leading back out again. Except I never heard or seen it leave. No engine, no movement, no sound at all. Just the quiet of the countryside. And me, alone, in the dark. I've stayed taking the main roads, home, ever since. My uncle lives around the shoreline of Lough, Neagh, on the Antrim side. I stayed there for a bit last summer. It was mostly just to get away from the city. The first night was great, calm, warm, and the lake almost completely still. But even still, I couldn't sleep, so I went for a walk along the shore. Didn't bring a torch, I just had the moon, and the lake was so flat, it looked like a polished stone in the moonlight. About 100 feet ahead, I noticed a figure, ankle deep in the water, completely still, facing out across the lake. I thought it was a fisherman at first, until I got closer. He was wearing clothes that didn't make any sense. Heavy wool trousers, a shirt buttoned right up to the throat, with the sleeves rolled down. Old, like 1940s, or maybe earlier. His trousers were wet up to the waist, like he had walked straight out to the middle of a lake and stopped. I said, "Are you alright?" He didn't react, not a twitch, nor a breath. I walked around the side to try and see his face. I noticed there was no reflection in the water. And as I looked back up at him, he turned his head toward me, slowly, almost as if the movement took a real effort from his part. His face was pale and wrong, like someone who'd been in the water far too long. Eyes washed out, lips grey, and the clothes so heavy that they should have been dripping, but they weren't. They just hung there. He opened his mouth like he was trying to speak, but all that came out was the sound of moving water inside his lungs. Not a coughing, more a sloshing of water. I stepped back, and as soon as I did, he took one step deeper into the lake, then another, and another, and another, never breaking eye contact. The water now rising to his chest, then his throat, then over his head. But he just kept walking. No splash, no panic, no bubbles. He was gone. I told my uncle in the morning, but he didn't look surprised. "There's ones that drowned that lake," he said, stirring his tea. "They don't always go down. Sometimes they come back up, looking for someone to walk home with."